Kate Warren, welcome.
Thanks.
You're the Executive Vice President of Devex.
Yeah.
What does Devex do exactly?
Great question. So we are a news and media platform for the global development, humanitarian, foreign aid community. So we serve over 1 million global development professionals providing news and information, really with the mission and goal to help empower them with the information to help them do their work better. So we are excited to be here as part of the conversations at Spark that are talking about some of those very issues.
Yeah, you've been invited to speak this afternoon. What will your role exactly be?
Yeah, so I'll be speaking on a panel around inclusive storytelling, which is something we think a lot about as a media organization, given that we have a platform to tell so many stories about what is happening in the global development space. So it's something that we think about a lot internally and our role and how we are, first of all, who we hire, the journalists we hire to tell those stories, how we tell those stories, the sources that we use to tell those stories. But we also think about the power of our platform and being able to share best practices, hold our industry to account on what's working and what's not working. So excited to kind of share some of that insight with the audience today.
And what is working and what is not?
Well, there's definitely a lot not working. I would say what is working is a real awakening to the fact that maybe we are doing things wrong. So you're hearing a lot of conversations really globally, and NGOs, or whether it's the UN or multilateral development banks, really being very self-critical and examining and saying, what are we doing that's wrong and how can I do it better? And being open and to receiving criticism, bringing some humility to the conversation. So you're really seeing a lot of that happening, at least we are, from the people and organizations we talk to. We've been doing a lot of reporting on it and how, there's this real legacy of rich, like northern or western countries donating to these poor, disenfranchised, vulnerable people. And it really has that embedded sense of colonialism, racism, that bias that's built in, that really removes agency from the people that we are working with. And I think a real reckoning in that in our sectors, we talk about decolonizing aid, localization, all of this is really intertwined into the narratives that we have and how we depict people, how they get to be part of that decision making, how they get to tell their stories. So I think a lot of that is evolving, which is really not that it's all being done right, and there's still, I think, a lot to learn, but it's been heartening to see that there's a lot of openness to learning.
You're organizing a special conference in Washington, you just told me?
Yeah, we just held that conference, and we did a whole track on storytelling to movement building, where we brought in people from around the world to talk about these very issues. One of our speakers really had some great insight on how to flip the narrative, and rather than asking, we talk a lot about the language we use too, right? So often we say beneficiaries. I think it can be a little bit of a problematic term in that it's giving the sense that these people are just benefiting maybe from charity rather than real actors in their own communities, real leaders in their own communities. But usually when we're engaging with the people that we're working with in the local communities, the way that we talk to them and hear their stories, it's more about putting them in this place of asking and needing help rather than in a place of knowing what they need, actually making decisions and being leaders in their own communities, and really rather than us asking them, we should be listening to them, right? So asking them, what should we do? What is working? And rather than expecting that just because you come from a richer country, you know what's best for somebody in a completely different country context. So those are some of the discussions that we had, and really encouraging people to think differently about how they tell those stories and who they ask to tell those stories.
This has a relationship with the localization, of course.
Yeah.
Why is this so important?
Well, why localization is so important, I'd say there's two. One is really just morally, right? I think a lot of the challenges we are trying to solve now in many parts of the world are a direct result of colonization, that many of the countries that are now giving money to solve these problems, we're an active contributor to. So I think there's a real moral imperative. But perhaps even more importantly is we know it's more effective, right? So the more that solutions can be homegrown and led by the people in those communities, the more cost effective they are, the more sustainable they are, the more impact they can have. I like to think about, I live in Washington, D.C., right? There's plenty of need in DC, plenty of poverty in DC. Of course, the images you see of DC are big stately buildings, so that's not what we portray out to the world. Of course, if you look at images of Africa, it's usually pretty desolate, even though there's really thriving metropolises across the African continent. But with that, we have a lot of social programs in the DC area. We would think it would be ludicrous to have somebody on the other side of the world decide what we should be doing for our communities to make our communities better. So why do we think that that is the right way somewhere else? It just doesn't make sense. And I think if you think about that perspective, you realize kind of how ridiculous it's been the way we've set up this system, and that it really needs to change if we want to be more effective. So we're really seeing, I think, an awakening of that. We've been talking about localization, or whatever term you want to use, for years, right? And there's been very little progress. I think it was, 6 years ago, this big grand bargain of many donors came together, promising to give at least 25% of funding directly to local organizations. That has largely failed, and in many cases has actually backtracked. And so we've been really examining why. Why is that not working? And it's really because it's a systematic failure. I think we think of our sector as being well-intentioned, right? Most of us that work in this space is because we have good intentions to do good. But often that can mask or even exacerbate some of the problems we're contributing to, because we assume because we have good intentions that therefore it must be good, when sometimes that's not the case. So I think that there's been some really great conversations that I've heard here at this conference today of bringing people from different communities, perspectives, background to talk about what is the role of funders and donors, of international NGOs, of local civil society, and working together to kind of fix some of these systematic challenges that no one individual or organization can really do alone. And I think that's why we haven't really seen much progress to date.
It's all about empowerment, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because what would your take be on job creation? The central theme today is Reimagine Jobs.
Yeah.
What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, you know what? I think that those of us who work in this sector need to reimagine our jobs, right? What our role is, particularly, and it depends on what perspective you're coming from, where you live, what kind of organization you work in. But if you are coming from the international NGO perspective or a donor and funder perspective, I think you really need to rethink what is your role, what is the appropriate role for you to play working in this sector. I think, again, we all do this because we're passionate about creating change and doing good, but we really need to think about what is the best way to do that, and that probably means changing the way that we operate and the way that we work. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about of it today.
And that's what you're going to tell the audience this afternoon?
Yes. I look forward to a really interesting conversation about this. Again, nobody's perfect, nobody's getting it right, but it's just great to see that these conversations are really happening, and hope that next year when you convene this group, there might actually be some progress to report.